Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Canadian Story. I've been absent for a little while, and Zach's been manning the ship quite well, so thank you, Zach. I'm here with Jory. Jory, would you want to introduce yourself? But before that, I want to say that here on the Canadian Story, we are very proud of the truckers and everything that they've done to inspire an entire nation. And I'll say the world, right? The entire world has been inspired by Canadian truckers. And I want to talk about what happened at Coots with someone who was there so we can get a true perspective from an eyewitness account. So Jory, give us a little bit about yourself. What makes you you? Why do you love this country? Why did you risk it all for our freedoms?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thanks, David. Who am I? I guess from a trucking perspective, I'm an entrepreneur. My dad, I grew up riding in the truck with my dad, and he, bought out my uncle and started a company. And the same year that he did that, I kind of started working for him. And then now we're partners in our trucking company, and we've grown that. We have 50 trucks right now that run all over North America. The bulk of our trucking business is cross-border, or the bulk and all of it prior to the vaccine mandates is cross-border work. And so the mandates have obviously been a giant pain in our side and really hard on our staff and on us as individuals. So that's one reason that we're really passionate about that particular set of things that are going on right now. But yeah, so I've been in the trucking industry for 16 years, and we have a trucking company. And so that's kind of how I would say we're tied to the trucking aspect. With the convoy, we kind of started out when they started talking about the Freedom Convoy and going from BC to Ottawa, and it was building a lot of momentum. I really liked it, the concept of it, and the ideal that truck drivers would step up as a group and kind of take their own mantle against it was just very, wells up passion in you for your industry, and the kind of people and the blue collar nature of who they are, and that truck drivers tend to typically be there the help each other out kind of guys, especially Canadian ones, because we face a lot of very intense weather conditions, bad driving and road conditions. If you've ever driven through BC, truckers help out other truckers, and it's just kind of the nature of who they are is to support one another on the road, right? And so for them to step up and say, okay, well, we've been working hard for the last 2 years to keep groceries on shelves and to get stuff delivered and keep the economy going. And the majority of truckers more or less ignored mandates in our world, and just thought that was ridiculous. And especially when you're traveling to America and back every week, you leave Canada, the land of the mandates and the craziness, and you drive into a free country, essentially, from most of their perspective. So you pull your mask off and you go about living your life. They let you in the truck stops, you can eat. And obviously things change constantly over the last 2 years, but they experienced on a weekly basis the freedom of America versus Canada, and the difference. Like, it was right in their face the whole time. It's like, Canada's crazy. America's free. It's fine there. It's no big deal. And yet I come here and we're completely locked down and everything's, that. So I think an average cross-border truck driver has a lot different perspective than a Canadian who hasn't left the country, or maybe they're home in almost 2 years. They've been out there in the world existing, and out of our 50 truck drivers, we in our business never once paid attention to any mandate within our building and within our property. And, it kept a very tight-knit community here of people that don't feel that way. And we had 50 truck drivers traveling all over North America for the last 2 years and didn't have a single COVID infection of a truck driver in 2 years.
Right? Wow.
We had one guy get COVID and get very sick, but he was sick when he came to work for us. Like, he was ill and then left in the truck and ended up getting sick. And we had Reese, my brother, who's the operations manager, who actually had to travel to the States, pick him up because he was so ill, and drive him back here.
Wow.
But outside of that one isolated circumstance where he contracted COVID prior to ever even working for us, not a single case, not a single major infection. We had some sickness go through our office a time or two, but again, we didn't it was just normal. People got sick, they stayed home for a couple of weeks, they came back to work, we all lived our lives, wasn't a big deal, right? So that is our kind of own little community experience with COVID. And an average cross-border truck driver has a completely different interaction with COVID and mandates and experience than the average Canadian. So when they took up the mantle to fight it, it's a lot less surprising than one person might think, I think, you know.
So how long do you think this was planned for?
The convoy? Man, I don't know. I know there's a lot of, in the industry, like a lot of people just disagreed with mandates altogether. And we've all known, we knew that the mandates were coming to the border for at least, I don't think it was quite 6 months, but for sure 3 months prior to those mandates coming in. And I talked, like, it was an uproar in our company because about a third of our drivers are unvaccinated. You know, so there's a lot of discussion on the matter as it was coming up, because everybody crosses the border every week. And I don't know if they're actually going to do it. I don't think they're actually going to do it. Like, they can't actually do it. Could they do that? Are they going to do that? And then, you know, the date comes and the date goes, and we're going, this is going to cause supply chain issues. This is going to cause rate issues. It's going to cause massive inflation spikes. Like, we can all see it coming. And you'd go talk to any of my friends on the street, or my wife was talking to a lady at Costco and just saying, well, she's talking about shortages and stuff that they're having, and they can't believe the price of groceries. She's like, well, you know that this mandate's coming, and that a good percentage of cross-border truck driving is going to be slowed down. It's going to cause more problems. And she's like, really? Like, people are shocked to find it out.
Why do you think they did it, in your opinion? Why do you think they did it?
Wow, that, man, like, I'm not Joe conspiracy theory, and to in a lot of extent, I've just ignored that type of talk, because I don't think talking about it has really been that beneficial in a lot of cases. Because if you can't do something about it, then just talking about it doesn't necessarily fix the problem, right? They want to see actual actionable things going on. But why do I think they do it? But without sounding like a full-blown crazy person, I think that they want supply chain issues, you know, to gain more power ultimately. You know, they want supply chain issues. They said they're going to create a food shortage, and then they're going to manage how we get our food, and then they're going to be the hero for the problem that they generated. It just gives them
or they're going to fire 10% of our nurses and doctors so that the healthcare crisis increases, that COVID seems worse, perhaps.
Yeah, friends who are nurses said, in all the shifts that I've been to in the last 2 years, we've rarely been staffed up to 50% at any given shift. So we're all overworked, and the people who aren't there because they're not allowed to be there, because they have a sniffle or a runny nose or whatever. And then hospital capacity is actually capacity of what we have available. So if we have 50% of our staff and we have 200 beds, well, we only have 100 beds available today, because that's all the staff that we have, right? And so,
interesting.
The statistics that are used to create their narrative are so often messed with, is how I would describe it. You know, at one point, Dr. Hinshaw more or less slipped in an interview and said that every kid that calls in either sick or doesn't attend school is counted as a COVID.
I remember that.
Right? And you're like, what?
What?
You're watching the television, you're like, no, that they could, no. Really? Because my kids didn't go to school a lot because we just, for whatever reason. So I'm saying every time our kids didn't go to school, you count it as a COVID case.
Huh.
Well,
I didn't know that.
The one that blew my mind was when they were like, that they were equating died with COVID and died from COVID. They were equating those two. Or hospitalized from COVID or with COVID.
Yeah,
right. That one was equated too. It's like, what?
They're happy not to clarify, right? Like, I can't remember again the exact statistic, but Kenny in one of his announcements came out with, well, a lot of because they test, if you're in the hospital and you get admitted, you must be tested for COVID daily from that point forward. And he said 60% or something around that percentage of people who are in the hospital counted as an in-hospital COVID case actually contracted it in the hospital. They were already admitted for something else. So they're there for a surgery and they end up testing positive, whether they're sick or not or asymptomatic, it doesn't matter. 60%
they're
of them are
testing
there for
everyone.
something else. So
Yeah.
so every day they're going to come in and swipe your nose and see if you have COVID or not, if you're in the hospital. So it's like, well, these are just going to ramp numbers up. And at what point did that become policy? Right? Like, so these are the numbers and we're hovering at this. And then one day we decide we're going to test everyone in the hospital with COVID every day. Well, then all of a sudden the numbers spike and you're like, well, of course they are, because you haven't been doing that prior. It's not a comparable, right? Like it's not apples to apples, and it hasn't been from the beginning, nor can you necessarily always blame them because things are constantly changing. But the problem is when they're changing things to adjust to the narrative that they're trying to create for the scenario.
For sure.
Right?
So when did you decide to go to Coots?
Yes.
What
we
was
should get back on point.
What was the breaking point?
So going back to what I said, the convoy was starting. They're going from BC to Ottawa. I really believed in that, and I saw the momentum building, and I was proud of what they were doing for our industry, that we were going to stand up and do something. We donated a fairly large amount of money to the convoy amount of things because I want to be a part of this, but I can't. We don't have trucks or drivers necessarily want to be involved in the Ottawa Convoy, but I want to be a supporter of what they're doing, right? So they came through BC, came through Alberta. Lots of people I know were involved in the convoy, and at least part of it going through. And my uncle has a couple of trucks from his company that actually ended up going right to Ottawa with them. And we were monitoring it quite heavily. And as they went through Alberta, a lot of the guys from Alberta and the southern Alberta specifically said, okay, well, what can we do to support the convoy without following them to Ottawa? How can we make their impact bigger across the country? Right. And so then I got involved in a couple of conversations with other trucking company owners that basically said, well, we need to do a protest the same day as they hit Ottawa somewhere. And I think all across Canada, we all need to have a massive protest on the day that they get to Ottawa to create a widespread understanding of how, even though not every truck driver is with the Ottawa Convoy, every truck driver is with the Ottawa Convoy.
Yeah.
Right? So that Coots thing kind of started getting some traction. And and I say this a lot, and I think people need to understand this because a lot of people don't, is that the government, symbolically, the government blocked the border first. When they put the mandate on that said, these specific group of Canadians are not allowed to cross the border because they're not vaccinated, they blocked them. It's invisible. You can't see it, but they're blocked. So they created a blockade that in my own company blocked 33% of my drivers from crossing the border.
Oh, that is a really good point.
Right. So they created the first blockade.
Can you repeat that? And yeah, it's important. I want people to focus on
that. So again, what I'm saying is that when the government mandated that unvaccinated drivers can't cross the border, they created a blockade at the border across the entire border from one end to the other. Unvaccinated people, and they created the tier system of people. There are people who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, and you have more rights than these people have, right? Yeah. And that's wrong, right? That's my belief, right?
I believe so too, yeah.
The symbolism of blocking the border is if one Canadian can't cross the border because they're less than, then no Canadian should cross the border.
That's an important distinction.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They just go, why are they blocking the borders? They're trying to hurt Canadians. And I won't ever disagree that there's a counterproductive aspect of blocking the border, right? That there's a negativity of the illegalness of it, and the fact that it hurts businesses and trade and all these other things. It hurt my company to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars for us to block that border because my trucks crossed at that border, right? But the symbolism of it is that we went to block the border to say, if you're going to block some Canadians, we're going to block all Canadians.
Yeah.
Right. And then they need to feel the same sting as the one, because people don't care about or at least connect with the fact that there's real Canadian truck drivers that now cannot cross the border. They can't. Well, they should have got vaccinated or whatever their excuse is. They made a choice and the government said, you're now going to be discriminated against. You can't work at your job. And no different for nurses or doctors or medical workers or whatever. It's the same sort of thing, but it's symbolic in its respect, right? And unfortunately, another part of it is there's multiple aspects of why blocking the border, in my mind, worked as far as getting traction and people seeing it. But It's the symbolism of blocking the border. It's the fact that it affects a lot of people that would have not otherwise paid attention. It embarrasses the government in that they can't control their own border. Like they really, it shows that they're not that powerful at the end of the day. They don't actually have that much power, right? And then it also affects other countries. Like the US now is paying attention. What the heck's going on up there? Right. So those things all happen at the same time. And unfortunately, I said this to a lot of people too. It's like the reason it got a lot of attention and why Coots at certain points was getting more media attention and social media and general attention than Ottawa was, is because it's entertaining. Yeah. It's like watching an episode of Yellowstone. What's going to happen next? The police are coming. They broke through the blockade. Right. This is happening. The guys are coming with the guns. Look at this video. Look at that. And people are just dying to see what's happening.
The next thing. I actually drove down because I was dying so bad and actually was there for a night, which was awesome. But
people want to know what's happening because it's entertaining. And in our world where politicians get voted in to control countries based on a popularity contest, and the minute that something gets boring, we swipe by it. We only have a 3 to 4 second attention span. People need to be entertained to get their attention. Like if you start to understand social media, you need to either get people's emotions involved, you need to educate, or you need to entertain. That's the 3 aspects. So what are we doing? And this is where Brant and Payton and I really started to dive into this, is that people will never, ever know about this until it goes viral online and that people are going to start paying attention. We need the GIFs and the TikToks and the live videos, and we need all aspects of this to get out there and just be exploding out on the internet. And we need to keep them interested. Right?
Yeah. So what was the mood like on the ground when you got there? So you pull up, you block it. Did you just like sit around and go, okay, now what? What happens next? Or what was it like?
It morphed a lot. It is a very interesting social experiment. I said that of course I talk about this all day, every day, it seems like, for a long time. It's a social experiment. And I a lot of things I knew about people and how they operate, and a lot of things I learned about people and how they operate is, we had roughly 1,000 vehicles on day one in that convoy. It was massive, right? It was a very, very large, kilometers and kilometers long. And a lot of people attention. The highways were lined with people with flags. Like there was huge support on the first day of it. And so people went down there, did a couple of slow rolls, and then they blocked the border. Okay. And on day one, it's Saturday, midday, the police are like, hey guys, you can't be blocking the border. This is bad. You need to move. And they said, well, we're not going to. And that was about the end of the conversation, right? They're like, oh, okay, I guess the border's blocked then. And they didn't have the manpower, and there's thousands of people and vehicles, and they just, there's nothing that could be done for it. So the police were just, and they're kind of used to the idea of these protests going on, and they were just starting. So there was no pre-deceived notion of what it was all about. And again, everyone was positive and peaceful, and there wasn't anything bad going on. So the police kind of more or less left it alone. So through Saturday and Sunday, it was kind of like a big party, and it's the weekend. No one has to really be anywhere. Campers are set up in the ditches, and probably a half a kilometer to a kilometer long, you had the highway line both ways and the ditch right full of campers and cars and people staying there and cooking and setting up and, hanging out and having a good time. Well, Monday rolls around now, and, people have been leaving Sunday night and going, wow, this is kind of getting serious. Like people are planning to stay here. This is more than I bargained for. I didn't sign, like, I'm not sticking around to see what happens. Like this is going to get hairy at some point. Right. And so lots of people start clearing out. And I think probably, again, numbers are tossed around very loosely, and I'll do the same thing here, but probably by the end of the day or by Monday morning, we had only maybe 300 vehicles there. So more or less 700 people or vehicles had cleared out, campers and everything else. And they kind of all focused in on that portion of the border that they were holding. And then on the Monday, the RCMP started showing up in force, right? So they're literally shipping dozens and dozens of police vehicles and cars. And now we're starting to have discussions and negotiations like, hey, you guys are leaving. Like you need to leave now. Like it's Monday, work is starting to happen. This isn't a joke anymore. You guys got to leave, right? And it's funny because everyone who'd come to Coots had come in their own little mini groups. whomever, our company maybe had 50 or 60 vehicles that came from our location that joined the convoy. There's a large amount from Tabor, Bow Island, Lethbridge, and they kind of all converged and went out there together. But, their prospective leaders are just somebody who created a meeting place and said, this is what we're doing. And we all kind of ran out there. So now when the police are starting to really apply pressure and they want to talk to someone or who's in charge here and negotiate or whatever, there isn't anyone in charge. It's just a bunch of people. And there's some people who might, have rapport with a good percentage of the people that are there or who are more well respected in the community. And kind of between Monday and Friday of that week, there were a half a dozen guys that kind of came up out of the word work. Some of them who are just really passionate speakers who are really feel strongly about freedom and have everything on the line. Some of them that are, more pillars of the community that are a little bit more articulate, well-rounded in their thought process. But it more just became people who people just generally looked up to, rose out of the group and were willing to speak. And so they became
the cometh the hour, cometh the man kind of thing.
Yes. So they become the de facto leaders. And so but that particular group of people, I didn't have a huge amount of rapport with a lot of them. I didn't know a lot of them. They didn't know me. So I have a lot of opinions and thoughts, but there was already too many cooks in the kitchen, and it was hard enough to establish any kind of organization or leadership there in the first place. And so I kind of just let myself step back and let the guys who are kind of taking the lead take the lead. But the thing that you got to understand about taking the lead in that instance is that if you're the leader of a business or the owner of a business, you sign paychecks and people more or less socially agree that you're the boss of them and they do what you say. If you're in the army, you've worked your way through the ranks and you've been given authority by a governing body and people are expected to listen to you. You go to a church, you were hired as a pastor, you have elders that hold you accountable. And there's all these hierarchical structures that keep the system is built on and people follow it, right? Whereas here, no one has sworn loyalty or agreement to anybody. And so when
it's just
they're trying
pure,
to have a meeting,
this is the no church in the wild kind of thing.
Yeah. So, there were a few scenarios where the leaders would go meet or talk with the police or talk with some MLAs or get some kind of traction. They come out and tell, the crowd of angry truckers in the saloon where we were, right. This is what we're going to do. And they would have a full on mutiny. Like right there, we're yelling and screaming at each other. And this is my opinion. And it would take an hour and a half or 2 hours to have people heard. And it was, I'll say, shockingly and miraculously respectful, although passionate. And it always kind of worked out in the end. And typically everyone would say what they had to say and everyone get their opinions out. Everyone would pray, and then we would take more or less a vote, or it would come to an agreement, and this is what we would do, right? And so it was super, super messy and very stressful, but it worked itself out, right? And then by the end of the first week, a lot of we were losing people by the day, because sometimes when a decision was made, some people go, well, I'm out then. I don't believe in what this is going on here, and so we're going to leave. Or there was a lot of political and financial pressure that came from large feedlots, big corporations. These guys all have businesses and trucks and equipment, and they have a level of loyalty, or they're owned in part by somebody financially. Yes. And so a lot of people left in the middle of the night almost ashamedly because they got pressure from someone that was going to ruin them if they didn't, right? And so little by little, inch by inch, chisel by chisel, people start getting pushed out, right? And at that time, they had blocked at Milk River, and so they wouldn't allow anyone in who was pro support to Coots. And so as people would leave, they let them leave, but nobody ever came back.
So what did that feel like in that moment where you're watching everything kind of? Did it feel like you were losing momentum, or what did you feel like?
Yeah, and that's where the thing is that was really tough for a lot of them, is that we did keep a core group there, and by the end of the first week, it was kind of like, if you're here, you're here, right? Like if you stayed a week and
you're not going anywhere.
All the pressure and the Tuesday, the day 4 where we had the police kind of bear down on us, and we created a big group, and
Yes.
they basically turned and ran, and they came through the barricade at Milk River in that big scuffle that was kind of the stand, if you want to put it that way, at
Yes.
Coots.
Yes.
After that, if you were there, you were kind of there. It didn't lose very many people after that.
What did that teach you about human psychology and kind of sociology?
What did that teach me? Well, it's I would say that I understand the divide and conquer and the psychological warfare that people like the RCMP use to divide and conquer and chisel down people. And like, I know quite a bit about negotiations and like the hostage situation, read a lot of books on that and business ideas about it. And it became very apparent in a non-business way of how to wear down your opponent when you play it out tactically. We weren't playing anything tactically, really, for the most part. And the joke was, well, your camp's been infiltrated, or there's undercover cops in there, or they're hearing what you're saying. And I would just laugh like, well, it's not really that complicated. There's no plan here, guys. It's not like we've got this big secret meeting that we're having and we're going to just throw them a sidewinder. Like,
yeah, exactly.
The
Well, it's the
trucks are
same with
blocking
Take
the
Back
road.
Alberta in a sense. It's like, it's not complicated. There's a vote.
Yeah,
And we
there's
can
a
go to
vote.
the
We're going to
vote.
go to it. He's
Yeah.
going to find out, like, we're blocking the road. We want our mandates dropped.
Yeah.
Like,
We will
I'm
keep
trying to
rocking
get that
them.
message
Yes.
out there. I'm not trying to hide it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
I
so-
want you to drop the mandates, folks.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big secret. What we actually want is the mandates dropped.
Yeah.
All this time.
That's great. I like
So, so that was a bit of the joke of it. So the beauty of it is that the people who were there and truly dedicated to it, the core group of the guys that stayed at Coots from the beginning till the time that we left, they all were very clear on the message and why they were there. And there was not really any question. And the leaders were then given a lot more latitude as it progressed, because there was some trust built between the group, right? Not to say that there was plenty of psychological things, like people who kind of came to create to stir people up and create a defector, like they
Yeah,
wanted everyone
yeah.
to leave. And you, at a certain point, you just started to see, oh, okay,
Somebody
this
move.
guy's here to stir up trouble and try and get people to leave, or this guy's here to try and radicalize the group if he can, or whatever. Like, it became really obvious.
Would those people come as civilians?
Yeah, they would. So like, there were ways to get into Coots. Like, if you had a pickup truck and you're willing to drive, half hour worth of back roads and jump through a field or whatever, there are ways to get in. So in the evenings, especially, like, say there was every morning, there might've been 150 or 200 people around having breakfast. By the evening, there was 300, 400, 500 people often, because people would kind of trickle in throughout the day, or a lot in the evening, especially because they want to see, or they have family there, they have friends there, or they just want to show up and see what's going on. But now they have nowhere to stay, right? Like, they're there in a pickup, and if they're not willing to sleep in their pickup truck, then they're going to leave. So then they would come in for the evening, and then we would balloon in size, and then every morning again, you're back down to your couple hundred people, right?
Right.
And so then weird people would show up. I heard a scenario where a guy had come in and was trying to sell drugs in the group, and they actually, a couple of the more guys that had been there all along, kind of rounded that guy up, walked him out to the police that were parked outside, say, hey, this guy's selling drugs, here you go, and they drove him out. Right? And
That's amazing.
more or less a half a dozen times there were scenarios where this guy's kind of weird and I don't know what he's up to, but can you take him out of here, please? And they would take him out, and the police would take him away, and kind of that kind of scenario, right? So, it was
it's just
became a
incredible to
community.
me that that it was such a natural human community that developed, that was like very protective, but there was no violence. Like, how do you think that happened? Because like, that's what they were trying to get you guys to do over and over again, right?
Yeah, and that's what they wanted. Like, they would come in force, or they would threaten us, or like, I'm walking back to the truck one night to bed. It was late, it was around midnight, and a cop car comes flying in, lights on, into the middle of the blockade, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? So I'm kind of watching, and he flips a UE down at the bottom and flies back out. Like, what?
That's it.
What are you even doing? And they're just trying to stir people up and get them excited and wear them down and play games. And they would come in and threaten that you're going to get arrested, or all your things are going to be seized, or you're going to be charged $10,000 a day for every day you're going to be here, and all these reasons. And the funny thing is, and most people won't really understand this, but myself and Brant Payton, I was getting messages in the probably at the peak up to like 1,000 a day, through Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, Signal, direct messages to me. And a lot of them were of information.
Yes.
Like I got texted pictures of undercover police officers that were there. Like, here's the picture of the guy that's there. I heard from a friend of a friend of a friend that this guy was.
Whoa.
And like, okay, whatever. Again, I don't recognize the guy, and it doesn't matter. But I'm just like the information that was coming in, or about,
and you couldn't tell what's real and what's not, right?
And a lot of it's misinformation, but a lot of it actually came out to be more or less true in the end. And so, like I got a call from a guy that worked at the airport, that said, hey, the RCMP intelligence plane is here, and it's been flying over top and taking pictures of stuff, and there's this many helicopters. And I was talking to this guy, and he said that one of the big RCMP plans is that they're going to start breathalyzing everyone, because they think everyone's partying, drinking down there, and they're going to start hauling people out for drinking and driving. Well, the next time we came in, they breathalyzed us when we came in. So,
wow.
like the intel was coming in, and it was, the hilarious part is there was nobody drinking. Like I'm not going to say nobody, but there were no alcohol allowed at the saloon, ironically, that we were at. If there was one time I saw a guy bring a beer in, and they told him to get it out of there, we're not drinking here. The people that were there for a reason. These people are truck drivers, they're working guys, and they're doing a job. Like that's the attitude of it.
So they understand we're in a job, so we're not drinking while we're on the job.
We're not drinking.
If you're a truck driver, you can't be drinking while you're on the job.
Exactly. And that they're all used to that. And so, guys, basically it was kind of like a truck stop. They're standing around drinking coffee, and there's plenty of food, and people were, there's multiple people that came down from the town of Coots that had issues. My employee who was with me down there, his name's Derek, a lady had come in when it was -30, her pipes had broken at her house.
No.
Like her water pipes. So Derek went down to her house and fixed it for her and got her all back up and running. And like, that's the kind of stuff that was going on. We shoveled all the sidewalks in the town one night. Right. I had a meeting with the mayor about halfway through being down there, and he, was very leery originally. When he found out we were coming, he'd actually sent a letter out to all of the citizens to say, hey, batten down the hatches, lock all your stuff up, just be prepared. This could be bad. Like, transients end up coming, and I don't know what's going to happen. Right. Which I don't blame the guy. Like, he's the mayor, he's warning constituents. He has no idea what's coming. Like, think about BLM and Antifa and all that kind of stuff. Like, protests don't have a positive.
Right now they're pretty. Exactly. True.
Right. And so, then that day, or the next day after I'd had a meeting with him, and he's a really super nice guy, his words were, what he said to me is, the only problem I've had since you guys have been here is that the police are driving too fast through town and ignoring traffic signs. And I've had a few residents complain that their kids can't play on the street because the police keep ripping through town. And he actually, the very next day, they had a town council meeting, and the members of the town actually were reaming him out for scaring them about the people that are coming to Coots that have been so awesome while they're there.
That is incredible.
Yeah, so he said, you guys have been great for this town. You put us on the map. The restaurant in town is doing amazing. Any business that existed there is good. The sidewalks are shoveled. The residents are not afraid. Many residents were giving people access to their showers, their bathrooms, letting people sleep there. Like, it was very good. And I'm sure there's always an outlier. There's going to be a couple people that are scared or, aren't willing to risk it or whatever. But a lot of people were benefited and blessed by that group being there. And what I said to the mayor when I met with him, and the reason I met with him, is they said, if there is anything, literally anything negative, I want you to send me a message and I will take care of it personally.
Yeah.
And I want the town of Coots to be deeply saddened when we leave here. That's the narrative.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Jory,
wait a minute.
Wait a second, Jory. When are you going to run for office?
I've been asked a few times. I don't know yet. We'll see how Take Back Alberta goes.
You and I need to have a sit down chat about that, because I think that you've proven yourself a leader, and you became a leader organically. But you know how, from what I can tell, you became a leader by taking responsibility and taking
Yeah,
on as much responsibility as you could.
yeah, and servant leadership. Like the thing is
Yeah.
like I said, I didn't try and stick my nose into leadership of the decision making of what happened down there. Like I kind of had to just step back and say, hey, it's in God's hands, and I trust that
Yeah.
the guys that are in leadership here are going to do the best that they can, and their hearts are in the right place, and so I'm just going to back them. But I did see the gap that I saw was in the narrative, the social media presence, and information. And I guess the point that we're going to on this, and we're going to get to, is the legacy media and how they were reporting
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
And
so I want to clarify from your perspective, would you by chance claim that the people at Coots were not violent racist Nazis? Would that be your position?
sorry, can you say that they're not?
They were not violent racist Nazis? Do you feel like you were perhaps misrepresented?
There may, that could probably be true what you're saying. They certainly are not. And man, how I do not know the exact details of the whole seizure of guns and everything. I know a fair amount about it. Some of it I'm not sharing because it could implicate some people and things, and that information doesn't need to get out. And it's not proven in fact, it's just opinion, so it doesn't matter anyways. But I met multiple of the guys who were arrested. And although they were maybe big, burly, young, full of piss and vinegar sort of guys that believe in freedom, I saw no ounce or trace of violence or threats from any of them, other than being young and wanting to fight for their freedom. Like they're passionate, right? And the thing that I say to everyone is like, okay, so the government, the federal government, the provincial government, every government that exists is just screaming from the rooftops, right-wing radical, Diagolon, plaid army, gun violence, murderous, blah, 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 blah. But nothing happened, right? We were there for 18 days.
Yeah, so that's a very important distinction to draw out. Was there ever, at any point, violence at Coots?
None, not a single bit of violence anywhere.
And were you there? And just to make it even more clear, were you there from the first day to the last day?
I was there from the very first day to the last day. I did go home on the 2 Sundays. I went home to get a shower, see my family, and come back. So I was gone for chunks of hours, 12 hours at a time here and there. But for the most part, I was there the entire time. And when I wasn't there, I was in direct contact with people that were on the ground there and getting updates as they were flowing, because I was keeping the public updated through social media. But there was one assault that happened allegedly when the barricade was broke through on the Tuesday, where there was a little car accident between a resident and one of the people coming through the blockade. And again, I don't know the details, but they were just upset because, they'd been in a car accident and it was a very tense situation. And so that allegedly there was some violence at that point, whether someone threw a punch or pushed someone else or something like that. But that is the only registered bit of information of any kind of violence in the entirety of the situation.
And if there had been violence, we would have seen videos. This is where I feel like it's a little bit miraculous, right? Because the eyes of the entire world were on Coots at certain moments.
Oh, literally.
And
hundreds of hours of video, live footage, and videos going at all time in every area.
And no violence.
No violence. And not even violence. We're not talking, there's no arguments. Right. There's no people getting upset and like for reference, when the first days that it was blocked, we had blocked in truck drivers who had crossed the border that couldn't go back, but were stuck between the blockade and the border. Okay, so 2.5 roughly days, those guys were actually trapped. And we more or less said they felt like we were holding them hostage, which isn't what we wanted, right? Now, those guys were daily offered food. They had bathrooms. They had the saloon, a heated place to go to. Like every amenity was offered to them that we could provide until we released them. So there was one guy in there that was, on day one, he was dancing in the street with people and eating the food and all happy. And by day two, he was running around at the tie-down bar threatening if we didn't let him go that he was going to start bashing people's windshields in. So, and they have footage of both him dancing and hanging out with the guys, and then footage of him running around a tie-down bar. When he left, he shook hands with some of the guys and they gave him some money for whatever. I can't remember exactly the details, but that was the most heated anything ever got there whatsoever at Coutts.
Wow.
Right? So in my mind, and between Ottawa and Coutts, but from my exact experience at Coutts, the protests that happened in Alberta and across the entire country probably set a world precedent.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Miraculous scenario to have literally tens and tens and tens of thousands of people protesting without any property damage, without any real actual violence and arrests or anything of that nature, without any, they didn't leave garbage. They set up a whole town.
That's better than Woodstock, right? They did. I was there. There was a town there.
There was a full-blown town feeding hundreds of thousands of people, fire pits and everything, and drive by there now and see what's there. Like it's a clean ditch. It's cleaner than anything ever. And same with Coutts.
Yeah.
Right. And
okay,
it's
so
unprecedented.
we have 10 minutes left, but I have two big questions.
Yeah.
The first is, what did it feel like? So there's a line in a Rudyard Kipling poem, where it says, if you can deal with being lied about, or if you can being lied about, not deal in lies, or being hated, not give way to hating, and yet not talk too big nor act too wise. Right? That's kind of what you guys did. You were real men. And like the end of the poem is, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance running, then yours is the earth and everything that is in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. Right. And I see these truckers as, like you said, they were doing a job. So they aren't going to drink and be disorderly. What I think has happened is that the rest of the world has forgotten the absolute quality of a person that you have to be the working class, to deal with reality every single day and make it work. So many people are comfortable. They've forgotten that it is hard to be that. It is hard to do that. That it takes character to do that well.
And truck drivers, like I said this to people too, truck drivers are an extremely abused trade. Like, they're expected to sit and wait for hours and sometimes days without explanation. They are like one of the most heavily regulated and persecuted industries as far as safety and regulation. And they can just be pulled in and strip searched their truck, and they're just used to it, right? And they just take it and do their job, and a very hard job. You're out alone with a piece of equipment running across the entire continent in horrible weather conditions. Like, it's an extremely emotional roller coaster and extremely mentally tough job. And people do not respect it for what it really is, for what truck drivers really are. And for them to be the ones doing that job and to do it peacefully, it doesn't surprise me at all. They are extremely mentally tough and principled people. And
you know what? That is such a good reflection, because there's a kind of stoicism in trucking, right? In that, and what, funnily, I don't think this could have happened anywhere else in the world, right? Because what are the two words that Canadians are known for? Sorry and A, right? We're the most polite population in the world, right?
Well, and the other part is that we actually got mad. Like, when did you ever see a mad Canadian? And our madness is going and standing in the street and saying, we don't like that, and putting up a hot tub and a bouncy castle. Like, we're just going to try and have a good time here because we need the government to know that we're here. So, but while we're here, well, let's have some food and let's sing "O Canada" and let's say the Lord's Prayer and let's do all the things that make us patriotic and be polite about it. Like, the cops are running them down and running horses over them, and their people are still saying sorry, right? Like,
but they're saying sorry with style, right? That's the beauty of it.
And I think that it's with anything, what usually is your greatest trait is also your worst enemy, right? The reason why we've let this go on so far is because we are so kind and compliant and anti-conflict and everything. Like, the Canadian standoff is holding the door for each other, right? Like the joke of it is, how can we be, how can we out polite the next person, right? So when they ask you to put a mask on, or they ask you to keep your distance, or they ask you to stay home, or you ask, like, we're just going to be like, the virtue signaling garbage with it all is like, okay, well, you're a more virtuous person if you wear 3 masks instead of 1, or if you if you'll take an experimental vaccine, even though it doesn't keep the other person safe, they're telling you that it does, because that's what Canadians resonate with. Oh, if I do this, it's going to keep other people safe. They'll eat that for breakfast. Canadians love keeping other people safe.
It's true. It's true.
That's what
we like shoveling each other's driveways and taking care of one another, bringing
100%.
each other food. Yeah.
And that's why they're saying it over and over and over from the parliament. Well, we're going to be there for each other, and we're going to help out our neighbors. And it's all lies, but it resonates with the Canadian public because that's what we believe in as a country. Right. And that's why it went on and on and on and on and on to this point where we got upset, because it's like we've been genuinely for 2 years, genuinely trying to help out our neighbor and do what is right. And now we're realizing that we've been screwed with this whole time.
And we don't like that. That's the other thing. Everyone thinks Canadians are nice. We're kind and we're polite, but we're tough. Right?
Yeah.
Our favorite sport. Our favorite sport is putting blades on our feet and bashing each other into the boards.
Yeah, politely.
We always apologize, right?
Yeah, like you say a story after,
Sorry,
that was a good one,
man.
bro.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it's a good one, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing I did want to say while we're on here too, and you got one more question, just the whole gun situation in Coots, and this is the misrepresentation and the point that we said is that nothing actually ever happened, and there's no proof behind any of the claims about how many guns were there, where those guns were, if it was even illegal, because it's not illegal to have long guns in your camper trailer or in your house. And where did it all come from, and where, like, the whole of it to me is such a false flag and a narrative that was created to discredit the whole movement. And the more they say it in Parliament, the more I believe it, is that they needed a smoking gun, literally. But again, even if those guys actually brought those guns in, they were locked in a trailer and they never dawned the light of day.
Right.
In the midst of anything that happened. They came down to arrest us. No one pulled their guns out and started shooting.
Right. No.
Nothing happened ever. And that's the thing that Canadians need to remember is a lot of people own guns. A lot of people are very passionate about their freedom. But no Canadians have taken a gun and threatened a police officer
during this whole time.
Right. Over weeks and weeks and weeks of the RCMP bearing down on Coots, on Milk River. Like on Milk River, when they bared down
Ottawa.
on a force of nearly 100 police without warning, they linked Arms Tango Canada and prayed for them. Like, give me a break.
That, like, you have to take a moment to appreciate that. That is insane.
That's a miracle.
That's
a miracle.
When has that ever happened?
Never. Okay, you know what? Gandhi.
Yeah.
And
you're like, we wouldn't compare ourselves to Gandhi because we're too, no, we're not Gandhi. Not every Canadian isn't Gandhi, but we are.
No.
Let's
yes, we are.
It's the same.
I love it. Okay.
So
my last question, Jory, my last question. What do you think of Jason Kenney after all of this?
Oh, what do I think of Jason Kenney? Do you know what? Jason Kenney, I voted for Jason Kenney first off. When Brian Jean and Jason Kenney were in a horse race, I like Brian Jean as well. I liked them both at that time. But I thought Jason Kenney was more of a bulldog that would get stuff done, and that he was experienced and he was going to come in and break the mold and do something different, where Brian Jean might have been just a little too nice. Right.
Yeah.
And I said too, I've talked to a dozen MLAs and MPs about this over the course of the last few weeks. And I said, what happened to the Jason Kenney that come driving in his Dodge pickup and is a fighter for industry and the people and the blue collar workers of our world? What happened? And a lot of them said to me, something changed in the middle of the pandemic. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, he was fighting for us actually pretty decently. Like, he's got a lot of pressure. There's left and right to contend with in his province. As a good Democratic premier, he has to take into account for both and try and provide solutions for both sides. I appreciate that. I believe in democracy. But something flicked a switch at some point, and he just went off the rails, so to speak, as far as just, I'm going with the narrative and this is the data. And I said a cop out of our political leaders to health specialists, right? They all want to cover their butt, because if anybody dies and they're going to blame me for it, I can't have that. So I'm going to go to a doctor. And I've said that to many people. Okay, so if you go to your doctor and you say, hey, I want to go back to work, I'm feeling pretty good, but the doctor thinks that you are, you're on the edge, like you'll probably be fine. But if you took another 2 weeks off, then you'll be good for sure. Okay. That's how doctors work, right?
Yes.
It doesn't cost them any money for you to take another month off work, but man, are their butt covered if something happens. That's how doctors work. That's why you don't let a doctor or an accountant run your business, because they're too safe. Right.
Right.
You have to find the risk versus reward and make the right decision. That's what entrepreneurs have to do every day. And Kenny, at a certain point, whether he got bought out, paid for, they got something on him, whatever, he just checked out and said, well, everyone's just letting the health officials decide. And so that's what I'm going to do too. And that's not governing.
That's not leading.
Abdicated,
right? He abdicated his position. Yeah, right? I agree.
And especially and it's been obvious through this whole Coots thing and prior that he has lied directly to Albertans on many occasions. I'll never lock you guys down again. 2 weeks later, he locks you down again. There were police assaulted at the border. There were no police assaulted at the border. Things like that, whether they be small or big or whatever, the guy's willing to lie, obviously. Right. And we're all very short-minded. And I think we need to not forget that a liar is a liar at the end of the day. Right. Because now he's gone the other way. He's trying to save his job. He's going to go against the federal government. He believes in freedom all of a sudden and all these things. But, he's just trying to get reelected. He's trying to not get fired. He's trying to maintain his job or whatever. And I think he's going down either way.
So what do you think? What do you think we should do about it?
Well, there's the Take Back Alberta thing. I think of all the plans and things I've heard of, I think it's the most measured approach that actually can hold consistent long-term power, more or less. So whether you want to be called the lobby group or not, it gives the power back to a group of people that Canadians have abdicated their role in government. As individuals.
Yes, exactly.
Right? All of us blue collar workers, we just want to be left alone to do our job and hang out with our kids and go camping on the weekends. Like, we don't want to talk to politicians. We don't want to have to give our opinions. We don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want to buy a membership and go to an SGM or an AGM.
Right. Nobody wants that. Last thing you want to do.
But we also didn't want to go to the border and sit there for 18 days and lose tens of thousands of dollars and risk getting criminal records and all kinds of other stuff. But we're, like all blue collar people, we're willing to do what it takes when it really counts. And I think that the Take Back Alberta thing is partially that. And I think if we've learned a lesson as Canadians and average Joe type guy Canadians, is that you can't just ignore politics for so long, or they will slowly roll over you until you think that they're going to leave you alone until they don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Jory, because I think that's the most important message of all of it. Like, people think that we need better leaders. No, we need better citizens.
Yeah. And I went to Edmonton on Tuesday and went to a protest there and trying to look at legal protests. And I got to say, I was incredibly disheartened. Right. And as a Canadian, for the last 2 years, I've been incredibly disheartened, because as much as I can, be really unhappy, I don't like to throw the word hate around, but, hate Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau and what they're doing, what they stand for, they were still elected. They were still put in. They're still, there might be 100,000 Canadians protesting or 1 million. But that's still not even a drop in the bucket. It's not even 3% of people speaking out and trying. And at the end of the day, especially when we voted Trudeau back in after all of the corruption and all the ethics violations and all the money going missing and all the proof of his corruptness, it made me begin to believe, and I still struggle with this daily, that I don't, this is what Canadians are. This is what it means to be Canadian now, is that I'm okay with my rights being trampled. I'm okay with corrupt government. I want to be taken care of. I'm weak. I'm sad. This is what Canadians
scared,
are becoming.
scared,
And I don't resonate
scared.
with that. So am I even a Canadian? Do I want to be Canadian? And that would be the biggest painful heart struggle that I have to deal with now, and have conversations on the daily about. There's so many people I know that are fleeing this country now.
Yeah,
That
Zach and I have a cousin who's left. He's gone.
Yeah, one guy, a good friend of mine, very well off, genius of a businessman, owns a lot of properties, and does really well for himself. He decided yesterday, he listed everything he owns, all of his Canadian properties, all of his assets are for sale, and he's moving. As soon as he's got everything liquidated, he's gone. Him and his wife decided that's it.
And you know what? We have I think we have an opportunity, a last opportunity perhaps, to take back our province and actually make this place the place we believe it is, people like you and I believe it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that we will. Honestly, I think those people are going to come back. And in fact, I believe, and this is, I don't know if this will happen, but this is my belief. I think we're 1 million people are going to move to Alberta in the next 10 years. Because we're going to become a beacon of hope for freedom. And that's my hope.
We have great industry, great jobs. We have all of the things of the world going for us here. So Alberta is has the potential to be the most prosperous place in the world, in my belief. I agree with that 100%. Yes. Yeah. But what I can't decide is that, I believe in Albertans probably more than anybody in Canada. I don't like to segregate. And I haven't been proud to be Canadian for 2 years. But I actually had Canadian pride when I was at Coots, and when I saw what was going on in Ottawa, and when I saw people from Quebec and Ontario and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta and BC and everybody come together. It made me want to be Canadian. It made me believe in what it has meant to be Canadian for the last 100 years, especially, right? But we need so much more. Like, not nearly enough Canadians are awake right now. Not nearly enough Canadians care to have to deal with the inconvenience of the emotional and physical pain of doing what it takes to save our country.
Yeah. But you know what? The truckers inspired a nation and they inspired a world. And you were one of those people. I want to thank you for that, because I have loved this country for a very long time, and I give all of my 20s to basically public service, right? In politics and in government. And I had lost my love for this country.
Yeah.
Over the COVID, and I was going to leave, and I can leave. I've got the money, I've got the abilities, I could just go. But because of what you and people like you did, and I'm from a blue collar background, so is Zach. Like, I did roofing and concrete, and we get it. But I wanted to go, and you guys kept me here and made me want to fight.
Well, and this is what I've said to many people is like, could I start a business in the States and get residency and move down there? Yeah, I could. I have 80 plus employees in Canada. I have friends and family here. I feel like I'd be abandoning them as a leader of many people. That's not servant leadership to me. And that's what who I am and what I intend to be is in full of integrity and honor and respect and care about my community. Leaving doesn't do that for me. Right. It doesn't solve the problem. Like it does. Someone needs to stand up and fight for those people, even if they won't fight for themselves. Right. And I'm just as bad as anyone else who's ignored government for the last 20 years. Right. I'm guilty as charged. Right. Like I stood up for the last month, but that doesn't make up for 20 years of ignoring it.
Well, you can make up for it by being involved for the next 20 years.
Yeah. And that is that's the thing that I think needs to change for me. And
that's the message for Take Back Alberta. That's the full messages. I like to say the good news is we're voting out a tyrant on April 9th. The bad news is you have to be involved forever now.
Yeah, you need to stay in it. We all need to stay in it. And that's the thing I actually really liked about Take Back Alberta is it's okay, this is step number 1, but then it's not over. Now we are a powerful group of citizens who can actually make effective change over decades if we stay in it.
Exactly. We just got to stay in it. That's the biggest thing. All right. Well, I got to go here, but thank you very much, Jory. I've loved this conversation. Zach, do you have any last words?
Yeah, Jory, I want to thank you for taking up the mantle of responsibility. I want to thank you for not taking the bait when baited, for not becoming violent, for standing up for integrity, for standing up for doing things the right way. That took character, and you and the people that surrounded you showed great example of character, and Canadians have a lot to glean from that. So thank you for being that example.
Thanks, Zach. I'm just trying to do it, but I think everyone should. So
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's the CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great our country is.